Hey yes peoples! Today I'll be ranking the 14 Thomas and Friends films from Thomas and the Magic Railroad right through to Big World Big Adventures. And diving right on in at number 14, Misty Island Rescue. I feel the need to point out that, unlike most of the fandom, I don't hate this film. The idea on its own is alright, but the execution is terrible. Though, when it comes to weighing up the pros and cons of this film, I'm shocked to find that I don't hate it. The pros, the idea. The cons, the logging locos, who are just so annoying, and Ferdinand says, that's right, and I'm not joking here, 17 times. Another con, the dialogue. 99% of the dialogue in this film is just annoying rhymes, and the other 1% is made up of 0.9% of alliteration and 0.1% of incorrect grammar.
I feel badly.
Yet another con is how stupid everyone is. First off, how would anyone let Thomas travel on that raft? I mean, I can sort of get Thomas wanting to get to the search and rescue centre on the mainland quickly, but I think even he isn't stupid enough to want to travel on the raft, let alone all the dockmen letting him. Then we have Thomas. He is just an idiot in this film, and he has completely forgotten the lesson from calling all engines. If calling all engines achieved anything, it was the in-universe realization that steam engines and diesels need to work together, and Thomas just forgot that, as shown by this clip.
I hope the Fat Controller chooses me. Every day I make sure I'm a really useful engine.
What about me, Thomas? I'm a really useful engine too.
Thomas was surprised.
No, Diesel. I'm sure the Fat Controller means a really useful steamy. You'll never be that.
And then, Thomas even hesitates when he considers whether or not to save Diesel's life. Diesel struggling to stay on the rails above the river is the only decent part of the whole film, and that's ruined by Thomas even considering not to save his life. Well, they don't put it like that, it just says that Thomas wasn't sure what to do, but that implies that Thomas was considering leaving Diesel there. And then, everyone acts like Thomas is the big hero who always makes all the right decisions, and he gets rewarded by getting a chance to visit the search and rescue centre on the mainland. Why does an engine have to go to the search and rescue centre on the mainland anyway? And why do they just forget about it after the film finishes, as if he was never going there in the first place? Thomas then acts like he always makes the right decisions, and completely ignores the fact that the logging locos are nearly out of fuel, and when they do run out of fuel, and they're trapped in a tunnel, he still says, "Oh, it's my fault we're here, but I'm still right." There's a ton more I could say about this, but I want to get onto the other films, so I'll just leave this there. Mark, 3 out of 10. Grade, D-. Number 13, Day of the Diesels. Now, this is a lot better than Misty Island Rescue. I wouldn't go as far to say that it's good, but I certainly enjoyed it. Like with Misty Island, the idea is quite good. Diesel 10 acting all kinds of Percy to get what he wants only to double cross him when he has it. Could be a really great idea when it's done right. It's great to see Diesel 10 sort of back to his old persona. He's nowhere near as menacing as he is in Magic Railroad, but after how much they ruined him in calling all engines, going back to this was welcome. It was also nice to see just how scared the engines are of Diesel 10 after Percy just mentions his name. Also, this reinstates Diesel 10 as a big threat as he actually wins. He double crosses Percy flawlessly, he has a better crane at Diesel Works, he holds Thomas hostage, gets Victor away from the Steamworks, and takes over the Steamworks. Although the climatic scene where all the Steam Team bursts into the Steamworks to confront Diesel 10 and Sir Topham Hatt arrives is my main issue. Like I said, this is the first time Diesel 10 returned to anything like Magic Railroad persona in 11 years. Admittedly, he only had 2 appearances in those 11 years, not counting the 30-second clip at the end of Misty Island Rescue, which foreshadows this film, and only one of those 2 appearances has him speak. But this is still the first time in 11 years that we have Diesel 10 at anywhere near his original persona. This scene ruins that. When Topham walks in, What's stopping Diesel 10 picking him up with Pinchy and throwing him across the room and resuming his conversation with Thomas and Percy, or picking him up and taking him to a viaduct and dropping him in the river, like he tries to do with Mr. Conductor and Magic Railroad, or, as shown in Day of the Diesel's alternate ending, Diesel 10 going back to the Magic Railroad persona completely and chasing Topham around the island like he did to Thomas and Lady at the end of Magic Railroad. Before this scene, the film was a bit ridiculous, unrealistic, taking Diesel 10 back to his original persona, but enjoyable. This scene ruins all of these things. It's like Sharon Miller was trying to make it more realistic and not frightening the little kids by having Diesel 10 suddenly transform into a wimpy engine who suddenly does what he's told, despite previously trying to destroy all steam engines. You can't have both worlds. Choose one and stick with it for, at the very least, the whole film, if not the whole franchise. Mark 5 out of 10. Grade C. Number 12. Calling All Engines. This film, I feel, is totally and completely average at best. There is not much to like about it, but there is also not much to dislike about it. The plot isn't great, as they all should know by now that steam engines and diesel engines should work together, and it can get a bit boring at times. The songs in this film, however, are great, especially Together We Made It Happen. The way the story is told feels quite good in my opinion, however the learning segments scattered around treats the viewers like they're stupid. And now we have Diesel 10. As I mentioned Diesel 10's persona in Day of the Diesels section, and I'm going to talk about it here. In Thomas and the Magic Railroad, Diesel 10 is this menacing villain who would probably stop at nothing to destroy all steam engines. Now he's been reduced to this grumpy engine who, like all engines, wants to be really useful. This is not Diesel 10. Mark 6.5 out of 10, grade B-. Number 11, Journey Beyond Sodor. I am aware that quite a large part of the fandom loves this film, with Northwestern 04 giving it a 10 out of 10 and ranking it above Sodor's Legend of the Lost Treasure. However, I stand with the unlucky Tug on this film. It's not a bad film by any means, but it just doesn't feel like Thomas. It starts with Thomas taking James's trucks to the mainland to prove that he's better than James. He loses his way, he meets an average character and an absolutely and completely annoying one. He gets imprisoned in the steelworks, escaping, only to go back to save James, then offers up the help of the annoying characters. Thomas and James competing with each other is just so old now. We had it in Reds vs. Blues, a season 19 episode which airs not too long before this special. The experimental engines are kinda meh. Merlin is great and has so much potential but is underused, but he did also have a reason for thinking he was invisible. He's a stealth engine, and in World War II, stealth engines were made with 3 funnels to create extra steam, so Nazi bombers couldn't see them, making them invisible from the air. Theo is alright, because he hardly does anything, so there's not much dislike about him, but Lexi is just so annoying. She changes accent every 2 seconds, says crazy things, and honestly, whenever I watch this film, I mostly skip a scene if it has her in. Frankie and Hurricane, however, are great. Frankie's a sly, villainous diesel who keeps Thomas at the steelworks and is clearly in charge of the two. Hurricane is a strong engine who helps Frankie, but has a slight glow of a conscience. You can tell he's not okay with some of the things Frankie's doing. And now for the songs. Somebody Has to Be the Favourite is quite good, but it doesn't really stand out. Who's Thomas is a pointless song and kinda meh. The Hottest Place in Town is a definite improvement, and it really stands out as a song. I Want to Go Home is amazing. We Can't Do Anything is alright, but goes on for way too long. And the most important thing is Being Friends is a great way to end. And now to address the 2 heffalumps in the room. The first is Beresford. I hate this character. His scenes add nothing to the plot whatsoever, and this film could easily have been done without him. This film is 70 minutes long, 10 minutes longer than usual. I'm okay with the films being longer, but the rumour is that the Beresford scenes were added in last minute just to add some runtime onto the film. Whilst I would like to see specials get longer, I'd rather go back to the classic 4.5 minute stories and they'd be great, than get a not so great 70 minute special with loads of pointless filler like the Beresford scenes. His first scene is just him blocking Thomas's way and sings a song. It's not even that great of a song. Whilst all the other songs help advance the plot in some way, this is literally a song asking who Thomas is. His second scene defies the laws of gravity when he throws Thomas around like a toy. And for all the people saying that it was Beresford that hid Thomas from Hurricane and Frankie, and what made him see James, so Beresford does have a point to this film, may I remind you that just before this, Thomas is at the experimental engines yard, and then he's right back there in the scene after this. Wouldn't it have made more sense for Thomas to see James from here? Also, I look at the 6 new characters, and half of them are very similar to other characters. Theo is Fergus, Lexi is an even more eccentric Marion, and Beresford is just a Merrick or a Reg. And now for the other heffalump in the room, the bouncing, as it came to be known. I hate the bouncing. It goes against the rules of this universe that the fans try so hard to cling on to. The rules state that these are just engines who have faces and personalities, simple as that. This means their bodies are static, not bouncing around like this. If this was done more subtly, I might not be complaining. Like in the season 17 episode Gordon Runs Dry, his body rises ever so slightly as he inhales the breath and then falls again as he dehails. If it was done like this, I wouldn't have an issue. Also, I don't mind the bouncing in the songs. I think it adds a bit more life into it, but please, if you are going to have bouncing in Thomas, please keep it to the songs and don't have it all the way through the film. And I'd like to get onto the other films, so don't even get me started on the ending. In short, I don't really like this film. It's not awful, and if it wasn't a Thomas film, I would probably enjoy it a lot more. The problem, though, is that this is a Thomas film. I can't stress enough, it's not the writing I don't like, it is basically everything else. My sympathy goes out to Andrew Brenner for having to put up with all the things Mattel has told him to put in, but the things Mattel has put in this time made this film trash, and you can't hide it. It may be well-written trash, but it's still trash. Mark 7 out of 10. Grade B.
Number 10, Hero of the Rails. It was at this point the ranking started to get harder. Hero of the Rails was a good film, and it's the first time that a steam engine is the main antagonist in a film, this being Spencer. What I don't get, though, is why does Spencer want to get another steam engine scrapped? I guess Spencer is probably protected against scrap because he's a private engine and one of the fastest in the world, but I thought all steam engines were in favour of continuing the age of steam. Also, Hero wasn't the first engine on the island. That was Edward. The only way Hero could have been the first engine on the island would be if he arrived before the railways were built, and that clearly isn't the case as we see him working on the railway in his flashbacks, and I struggle to see how every single engine thought Hero would be scrapped if the Fat Controller found out, even Edward and Toby. One of these two must realise how famous Hero supposedly was, and knew that a Fat Controller wouldn't scrap any steam engine, let alone the master of the railway. Mark 7 out of 10. Grade B. Number 9. The Great Race. I honestly really like this film. The songs are all amazing, but it still does have its flaws. First off, the title. The Great Race itself lasts about 2 minutes. Second, Ashima is just an uninteresting character. She plays a similar role to Gator in Tale of the Brave, but we actually get some backstory about Gator. What do we know about Ashima? She's from India, and she's well painted, and she's good at shunting. Then, the Diesel subplot is useless. Sure, the song is okay, and for all those people saying that it did have a point because it meant Thomas couldn't go to the railway show, he's there anyway, and competing in the competition that the Fat Controller was going to put him in anyway. Okay, it might have a bit of a point in realising Gordon's safety valve was still at the steamworks, but there could have easily been a scene with Victor and Kevin realising without Thomas, and I reckon Gordon would probably realise what had happened after the Great Race, considering he's burst his safety valve before. And one more rant, the bridge jump. I hate the bridge jump. I'm okay with things in Thomas being unrealistic, but this is about 17 steps past realism, and it doesn't affect the plot at all later on. If Thomas had suddenly broken down during the shunting competition because of it, fine, but it serves nothing to the plot. Also, why is the shunting competition even a thing? Mark 7 out of 10, grade B. Number 8, Big World, Big Adventures. This film was actually much better than I thought it would be. Part of me sees it like Journey Beyond Sodor, well-written rubbish, but it's actually better than that. Andrew Brenner managed to make this terrible idea into a decent film. However, it does feel too disjointed and a bit plotless. First, it focused on the Fat Controller and the engines trying to work out where Thomas is, followed by Thomas travelling with Ace. Then it's Thomas finding his way across Africa with Nia trying to catch up with Ace, followed by getting Ace to another race, followed by looking for Nia, and then back home. All the while, the Fat Controller is following Thomas around. The songs are great, especially Sometimes You Make a Friend. Mark 7 out of 10, grade B. Number 7, Thomas and the Magic Railroad. If it hadn't been for the test audiences, this could have been a really good film. In my opinion, it's still good, just definitely not part of Thomas' canon. There have been many theories on how Magic Railroad could be canon, but the one I personally choose to accept at the moment is that it was all a dream. Either Thomas or Percy, as they were the most scared of Diesel 10 and calling all the engines, or Edward, as he is the only Season 1 character not to appear in Magic Railroad. That aside, I do think it's a decent film, but I recognise its flaws. First off, not many British kids would know what Shining Time Station is, as it was an American show designed to introduce Thomas to American audiences. I think that I was in minority when I say that I'm a British kid who not only knew what Shining Time Station was, but had also seen some episodes of it before watching Magic Railroad. And, since Thomas is primarily a British show, British kids are more likely to go and see it than American kids. Second, we still to this day do not know the full details of Diesel 10's first meeting with Lady. I get that, since it was a complete failure, the people making Thomas are trying to pretend it never existed, but you just can't do that. It was Thomas's first movie, and if this film hadn't been a failure, Britt Allcroft would never have sold the rights to the show, and we would never have got the mediocre to bad seasons 8 to 12, and the appalling seasons 13 to 16. But then again, we never would have got Andrew Brenner and the great seasons 17 to 21, and a surprisingly good season 22. This film shaped the Thomas franchise. You can't just pretend it never existed. And they should just tell us what happened when Diesel 10 first met Lady. And then, how is what Burnett Stone did a mistake? I get that he was originally talking about Boomer, and they just did a voiceover of Boomer to an evil Diesel. But what Burnett Stone is describing isn't a mistake. If a Diesel was chasing Lady with the intent to destroy her, driving her too fast shouldn't be a mistake. If he drove her more slowly, she still would have run out of coal eventually, and Diesel 10 probably would have caught up. Mark 7.5 out of 10, grade B+. Number 6, King of the Railway. This was the first film by Andrew Brenner's crew, and they made a great first impression. It still wasn't as good as the Railway series or even the classic era, but it was the right side better than the Sharon Miller era. The plot overall was good. My only real complaint was being that it feels a bit disjointed, and the subplots don't really come back into the overall plot. I mean, what has Connor and Caitlin, Millie, or Gordon and Spencer racing got to do with the plot? That being said, Stephen is great. Mark 8.5 out of 10, grade A-. Number 5, The Great Discovery. For a Sharon Miller special, this is surprisingly good. I'm glad they decided to cut the learning segments like they had in Calling All Engines, as they assumed all the people watching were like 2, and the story feels quite good. Sure, the Fat Controller is a bit of a jerk, and the narrator gets a bit carried away.
Welcome, Stanley!
But it's decent. The songs are great, and the use of the narrow gauge engines and minor characters more worked well, and I think that almost every character in the show at this point got at least a cameo. Although Great Waterton is never used again, I quite like the idea of it being found and restored. Mark 9 out of 10, grade A-. Number 4, Blue Mountain Mystery. Again, for a Sharon Miller special, this is surprisingly good, but I put most of that down to the fact that Andrew Brenner was the script editor. Luke is great, and we get some of Victor's backstory, which we had never seen before. He just appeared in Hero of the Rails. That being said, the scene where all the narrow gauge engines run away from Thomas really bugs me. This is the first time since season 4, 5 or 6 that Skarloey is anywhere near his true persona, but the real Skarloey would not do this. Again, the two songs are great. Mark 9 out of 10, grade A-. Number 3, Tale of the Brave. I feel this is better than King of the Railway, as I don't think there are as many irrelevant things. That being said, apart from the token newbie in both this and King of the Railway, the other newbies don't play a part. Reg, Timothy and Marion do next to nothing in this film. The songs, once again, are great, especially Our Tale of the Brave, and the fact they used a member of the Steam team, in this case James, as the main antagonist is great. Gator is great, and whilst he plays a similar part to Ashima in The Great Race, we actually get some backstory about Gator. Mark 9.5 out of 10, grade A. Number 2, Sodor's Legend of the Lost Treasure. Now, this film is amazing. Being the 70th anniversary year, there were lots of references to past Thomas books, episodes, and films, and as more railway engines appearing is one of the best things I can remember coming out of the CGI series. Marion thinking small railway engines are magic is reminiscent of Gordon, Henry, and James thinking that
We engines must be some kind of magic.
the use of a human antagonist is great, and the fact that Skiff then turns against him adds to the scene. This time, the subplots, like Marion wanting to find the treasure, do come back into the overall main plot. There are only 5 new TV series characters that I can think of, and they all added to the plot. The songs are great, and the chase scene at the end is brilliant. Mark 10 out of 10, grade A+. Number 1, The Adventure Begins. This is the best Thomas film from start to finish. Being based on the first 2 books by the Rev Audrey, it has some of the most classic stories in Thomas. What the writers did with Henry's persona and the original text was very clever, if a little disappointing for most fans that wanted to see Henry go back to his original persona. Edward, Thomas, Gordon and James are all great, although technically James shouldn't be there, but my main complaint is Henry and Tim of Sheds. Henry should be in his old shape, and Tim of Sheds should be in its pre-calling all engines build. Then, the chase scene at the end is great. I am normally in favour of realism and classic retellings of the books, but I love this chase scene from the music, the tension, the guards, and that stupid but great pun. Then the credits rolled, and I feel like crying every time I watch it. The fact that they used railway series illustrations over a really useful engine is just the best ending possible. Mark 10 out of 10, grade A+.